Several months ago, something happened in our family that in the moment didn't really jump out. As I prepared for this message, it came back to my memory. We were checking into a hotel and all of our kids were with us, and you're dragging your bags through the entryway. And as we're getting on the elevator, Nolan, who I think was 7 at the time, now he's 8, he asked me the most interesting question. He said, "Dad, is this a robe hotel?" And it took me a minute to kind of understand what he was asking. And there's been a few times in his life where evidently he's been lucky enough to be in a hotel where there are robes hanging, close to the shower or in the closet. And I remembered at that moment that though I've never worn one, they never seem to fit. Nolan, if there's a robe, he lives in the robe. And it's only happened a few times, so it surprised me that he remembered it. And I regretted to say, "No, son, there is not going to be a robe in our hotel room. There's not 2 robes hanging in the closet." And I thought about that and envisioned him, walking around the hotel room in that robe. It's just this picture of, man, I belong here. I have a place here. I think there's a side of it to where he feels really powerful when he's wearing the robe. This last weekend at church, the parable we covered was really 3 parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And I'm standing on a porch right now, and what I want us to do in this small group video is dive a little bit deeper into the parable of the lost son. Since we've already covered the others, let's just focus specifically on the parable of the lost son and how it reveals God's love, which we're going to get to. But in this story, it also reveals so many of the relational questions we find ourselves asking as we navigate life. Do I have a place here? Whatever place that is. How do I compare with my siblings? Have I done irreparable damage to a relationship that I can't come back from? And even if I come back, do I deserve the full blessing? And here's what I want you to know. The answer to all those questions can be answered like this. We need to come to a greater understanding of God's love. That's what the parable's about. It's about porch love. The kind of love that's always waiting on the porch, ready for you to come home, ready for you to come to your senses. So I want to take a few minutes and go deeper into a subject that we all might find familiar, God's love. And I want us to understand it in greater measure and then discuss it in this small group. And so as we think about the Father standing on the porch every day, ready for the son to come home, I want to share with you 3 principles, 3 truths about this kind of love that's still to this day, right now, waiting on the porch. So let's go. Number 1, the love of God is meant to be the foundation of my life. It's not merely something I experience or makes me feel good. It is the foundation. All of us are tempted to build our lives on so many other foundations, right? Our ability, how our life seems to be going, that becomes the foundation, what other people think about us. But the best, the surest foundation of my life is to wake up every day and know I'm loved by God. I'm His son. I'm His daughter. Ephesians 3 says, I pray that you would be rooted and grounded in the deep love of Christ. It's our foundation. Here's the second one. God's love compels me to live a better way. The more I'm focused on God's love for me, the more I obey His truth, His word. We think about God's love as something very emotional and not something that drives us. What I want you to see is that Christ's love, 2 Corinthians 5 says Christ's love compels me. In other words, it changes me. It transforms me. It shapes me. It's not merely something that accepts me. It does. God's love is not simply something that says, hey, everything's great, I'm with you. It does say that God's with you. It reminds us of that. But it's also a little more action, a little more intense. It compels us to not stay where we are, to live a better way. God's love calls us out of our sin. It calls us out of our pit. It wakes us up. What woke the son up? My dad still loves me. Even though I'm not lovable, my dad still loves me. He's waiting on the porch. So God's love is my foundation. It compels me, it calls me out of where I am to something better. The last thing about God's love is that we were loved first. Long before I ever thought about being worthy of God's love or following Him, He loved me. He initiated the love. He loved me first. 1 John 4:19 says, we love because God first loved us. The story of the lost son is a reminder that I can blow through everything He gives me, and I can ignore His lessons, tarnish His name, and waste my life, the life He gave me. But if ever I come to myself, I still have a place in the Father's house. He is right now still on the porch. And to answer the question that Nolan is asking, and that all of us, no matter how old we are asking, is there still a robe for me? Is there a robe in that room? You have to think the son is asking, is there a robe for me? Or am I just going to be a servant? And what this amazing parable teaches us is there is still a robe with your initials on it. So as we dive into some questions, as you guys have conversation in your small group, I want us to think about how we have experienced God's love and share that. But really, what we've got to ask going forward is where we need to experience it, where we need to be reminded. Because we all have those lies of the enemies reminding us why we don't belong, why we don't fit, why the relationship can't come back. How even if we do say I'm sorry, we'll never be restored. This parable proves that wrong, but in the end, it's God's love that calls us out of that place, back to a place of the robe and the ring and the feast. And I pray we step into that in greater measure, starting in this small group.